Welcome to the River broadcast, my dear old fruits. Why can Harry not keep his mouth shut? Is it really so difficult? To have a little bit of discretion, this is all people are asking for. I'm just about to get stuck into him, actually. Perish that thought. I'm going to be holding forth on the subject of Harry, but for one moment let's just look at the King and Queen yesterday, who arrived for Sunday service in September greens was the Queen, with crimson, featuring tartan, a pillbox hat and feathers of the season. Oh, it was a tonic, and the King was sat in the back in his country attire, looking very smart, while his consort kept the driver company. Isn't that jolly? But as for the second son, all he was expected to do was to be quiet, to not explain, not complain. It's the other way around, isn't it? Never complain, never explain. Why can't he just stick to that mantra? He was granted an audience with the king, as you know, and all he had to do was be discreet. And it doesn't matter what the press say, Harry, in response to that news. It doesn't matter what you say. It doesn't matter what the River broadcast says. It doesn't matter what your Aunt Fanny comes out with. Just keep stum. This is what the king and William have to deal with every time. He just won't allow the press to do what the press do, for gossip and for people to talk, without sticking his oar and having to have his say and exacerbating the situations. And then, of course, came the son. And their version of events for the meeting between king and son was that it was distinctly formal, that Harry had joked that he felt like an official visitor rather than a family member, and that Harry handed a framed photograph of Prince Archie and to the grandfather Charles. And this raised Harry's ire, and all of a sudden his spokesman is tottering out and bugling. A spokesman for Harry said, "While we would have preferred that elements of the meeting, such as the exchange of gifts, were not revealed, for clarification purposes, gifts were exchanged, and a photo from the Duke to his father was given, but it was not of him and his wife." Well, we should be glad about that at least, but so trivial, so kiddish. Is it really necessary to come out just as they appear to be making some kind of progress to the outside world, but those in the know think there isn't really that much progress being made? It's an embarrassment for any mature adult. Can you imagine the late Princess Margaret Rose, were she alive, to make such a big old fuss after Harry revealed that he had his nose put out of joint when she gave him a Christmas present around the dinner table, wasn't it, of a biro pen wrapped in a fortune-telling goldfish? And he didn't seem to be happy about it. Well, anyone would tell you, if they weren't so inclined to fury and indignation as Harry is, anyone would tell you, any sensible associate, that perhaps it was merely an affectionate marker of the eccentric personality of the late Princess Margaret Rose. That was her sense of humour, and perhaps a little touch of prophetic foreboding in there as well, because she probably sensed fishy business and a poisoned pen in the future. The Duke's spokesman went on to say, "The quotes attributed to Harry by the son are pure invention fed. One can only assume by sources intent on sabotaging any reconciliation between father and son." You are the saboteur, Harry. You are the only one that did that mucky business. "Presumably those same sources have also chosen to disclose that gifts were exchanged." And then the spokesman goes on to confirm that the photo was handed over, which we already looked at. Well, notice, by the way, nobody has come out denying my information that Harry drank coffee at the meeting and tea did not touch his lips. Nobody has denied that from Harry's camp. Why? Well, you'll have to ask Harry, but perhaps because it's true. The Mail on Sunday reported Harry lambasting the grey men in suits, just like his late mother warned of, for trying to sabotage his reconciliation with the king, and they said that Harry was infuriated at what he sees as a concerted effort by officials to torpedo his efforts to strike a rapprochement with his father by giving hostile briefings to newspapers. "Harry, you wretched boy, you told us yourself that your father doesn't read newspapers. You told us that, and You didn't think that he would be reading your tome. You also told us that. You know that he knows not to trust a word written in the press. He already knows that. So why do you think that our busy king will be spending his time at Balmoral scouring all the tabloid column inches just to see what they're saying that you said? It doesn't make sense, does it? He's got better things to do, and he is not your personality type that is absolutely histrionically hell-bent on seeking out every tiny little slight whispered in the most dusty corner of the kingdom. Credit King Charles with the sense that you're lacking, boy, and don't judge other mature adults by your own mischievous behaviour patterns, please. A source associated with Buckingham Palace, and not the palace itself, by the way, told the Telegraph that Harry's suggestion that the institution was out to scupper the father-son relationship was counterproductive. It's very sad, they said, especially because everyone has been working hard behind the scenes to make the private relationship work. Both sides, whether it's the palace, Clarence House, or Harry's side, the Sussex camp, have been accusing each other of leaks. I'm here to tell you, as a matter of fact, that people talk on both sides of the lollipop. Yeah, they do. Whispers catch like wildfire. That's the way it goes. Staff talk, aides talk, drivers talk, PAs talk, and perhaps sometimes they think that they are speaking discreetly, but one discreet whisper is relayed to another until the whisper becomes a scream. You know the way it goes, my dear. Gossip makes the world go round. You can't escape it, no matter how Harry wants to clamp down on every single whisper that he doesn't approve of. And if you want to avoid that, Harry, the only way you can do that is to become a hermit, which we wouldn't mind. Become a hermit and interact with non-human sentient beings, least of all your wife. But Harry, dear, if you're concerned about this sabotage that you speak of and the exposure of confidential information, then you may wish to reconsider your insistence that your conscience is clear, as you've been insisting lately in the wake of At Home with the Harkles by Netflix, and Sussexes Do Oprah Winfrey, and the several hundred lurid and laborious pages of your memoir. What a hypocrite. And you have the unmitigated gall to speak of sabotage? Well, Prince William is a far more elegant affair, and last Thursday I told you, for the umpteenth time, I might add, that it was actually my understanding, based on the insight of others very much in the know, that the rumours of friction between the king and heir, Charles and William, were a total fabrication, indeed sophistry. And I've been saying the same thing for weeks, since all this mischief started bubbling up and rippling up in the press. But I confirmed all of that last Thursday, and then last Friday, a day later, Rebecca English exclusively revealed exactly the same thing. Oh, Becky, love. Her source, as she calls it, saying that her source is close to Charles and William, said it's evident there's an attempt to manufacture division between them when in reality no such rift exists. In truth, their relationship is as strong as ever. They are aligned in their work, blah, de blah, de blah, de blah, de blah. Well, did you see? There was a very touching piece of footage in a trailer with William and Eugene Levy, or Levi. That word always puts me in mind of my Judy, you see, my Judy Garland. But William was talking with this comedian, who I know nothing about, in an episode of his series, The Reluctant Traveller. And he said, I'd say 2024 was the hardest year I've ever had. Life is said to test us as well, and being able to overcome that is what makes us who we are. I found that very moving, and I thought that it was wisdom and sage words from our future king. And actually, when he speaks of a test in order to bolster one's character and the outcome of one's life, it points to a spiritual reckoning within the man, doesn't it, my dear? William has known the cruelest type of loss and sorrow and grief when his mother was snatched from his life. But he reckons that 2024 was actually the hardest year of all. Doesn't that put things in perspective and frame things? How absolutely awful it has been for William. His father taken poorly, his beloved wife taken poorly, undergoing treatment, the family put in great jeopardy, the unknown of the future, all while balancing his life with a very serious role and life's work undertaking, his new role as the Prince of Wales, the Duke of Cornwall. 1,000,001 responsibilities. The press dare to call him Workshire Wills, but you and I know, because we see what they get up to, that it is a relentless workload, with no sibling to lean on for support whatsoever, and with a wife who was experiencing such intense scrutiny, some of it critical and very harsh from all corners of the globe, at her very darkest hour, and all that being the icing and the cherry on top of a toxic cake that was whipped up by the Sussexes themselves over the last few years, causing misery and all kinds of drama. But Prince William is bang on the money, and I think that it does us all good to reflect on those words as a reminder to us all that life is said to test us, and being able to overcome that is what makes us who we are. A small diversion here on the subject of bronzer and suntan. No, I'm not talking about Meghan on this case, I'm talking about Donald Trump. Tony said, "I do not like anything about Mr. Trump, but I give him a pass on the bronzer. I've seen photographs of him without makeup, and his natural complexion is quite the colour of a dead fish. So bronze away, but do work on those goggles." Yes, because for some reason he gets goggle marks, doesn't he, around the eyes, and I can't quite work it out. What flummoxes me is how there are no collar stains that I've seen. They might exist out there, but I never see sort of marks of makeup or cosmetics on his very white starched collars, to my knowledge. And it can't be a sunbed that provides that sort of glow, can it? Despite those goggle marks, because, as you say, he regularly appears very pale-skinned immediately after he's appeared with the tan, with the maquillage. Do you understand? For example, when you see him out golfing the day after a big event, he will be pale-faced, makeup-free, and without the drag, because you understand that Trump, like most politicians, and all of us to some extent, drags up. It's drag. One is born naked and the rest is drag. That's the way it goes. Just as the royals do, and I do, and you do. It reminds me of an embarrassing tanning phase of my own that I went through when I was a teenager. I was 14 years old? 14 or 15. And I went through a summer of experimenting and discovering self-tan, because I do go a colour if I put the effort into it, although I never bathe in the sun now, can't bear it, and I'm very good with the sun creams and everything. But as a teenager, I would get a bit of a colour. It would take a while to develop on me, and I'd have to be careful not to go pink and get burnt, because I am very fair-skinned, but I would go quite a nice colour, but never a deep, rich, caramelly brown that some people were lucky enough to get, although that's not the look that I envy these days at all, but as a child I sort of did. So I experimented with self-tanner, and for a start it stank, it absolutely stank, and I thought it looked wonderful, and all of a sudden I had bronze skin. Looking back, it must have looked absolutely frightful, but I was so proud of it, and I showed it off to the family. We went for a day to the beach, and it said on the bottle it was waterproof. That's what it said. And they were sort of goading me, "Oh, surely that can't be real. What have you been up to ever?" And but I insisted, "Oh no, it's the sunshine. It's the sunshine." And the trouble is, we all went in the sea, and as I was in there, I could tell that it washed plain off within a couple of minutes. But it didn't just wash off; it left me with dark elbows and knees, and nose, various extremities, my dear, were stained with the bronze, and the rest of me was lily white. It wasn't a good look, and you know what? I stayed in that ocean for what seemed like hours, clinging to a lilo. I was too ashamed to get out, because I knew I'd be a laughing stock. I think I waited until the sun set, and then quickly ran for a towel, but yeah, that was pride before a fall, one of those lessons in life that we all get. Had egg on my face. Never again, my dear, never again. Now let's move on to discuss this creature, who is Livia Giugioli Firth. No, I'd never heard of her either, my dear, but she's the ex-wife of Colin Firth. I wish her no ill will, by the way, despite the fact that I'm about to disparage her royally. That doesn't mean that I have any ill will for the woman. But she's been behaving like the patron saint of Megania recently. She's been taking a leaf out of Meghan's book. Virtue signalling like a clapped-out Cortina, she's been. She is an Italian activist, or Italian-born, I believe. She advocates for sustainability in fashion, and she has returned her MBE, which she was awarded under the reign of the late Elizabeth. Her member of the Order of the British Empire, I think it was an honorary one. She was awarded this in 2019, which, by the way, ordinarily one would be nominated for or lobbied for by one's peers. And just so you understand, when your peers nominate you for one of these honours, you can't go for a specific rank or ask for an MBE or a CBE or an OBE or a knighthood. The nominations committee decide upon that. They confer with regards to the nominations, and then they decide upon a rank. And she was ranked MBE. But it's not as if King Charles, or in her case Queen Elizabeth, was sitting around and, on a quiet day and thought, oh, that Livia Giugioli Firth is indispensable, isn't she? One must decorate her with glories and honours at once. No, that's not the way it works. Well, Livia returned her MBE, and she tore up the certificate in protest over Donald Trump's state visit. That's what it was all about. And she accused the king of legitimising and amplifying Trump's poisonous rhetoric. Her letter, addressed to the Central Chancery of the Orders of Knighthood, said, "The king has been part of a frightening and cowardly display of appeasing. Although I stand against the British Empire and remnants of that toxic system," this coming from a fruit of the Roman Empire, one assumes, insufferable virtue signaler she is, "I accepted the honour on behalf of the many garment worker activists who had educated and supported me." Liar, 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 pants on fire, Livia Giugioli Firth. You accepted the honour for yourself, only you and your interests, so don't pee on my leg and tell me it's raining. Where were your principles then, Livia Giugioli Firth? In 2019, your scathing rejection of empire while greedily snatching a trophy declaring you an honorary member of that very empire. Is the truth of the matter that it did not bring in the business as you'd so hoped? Where were your principles, Mrs. Giugioli Firth, when you accepted your MBE, when you claimed to stand against the remnants of that toxic system you elected into that system by accepting the MBE, and don't you dare lie and say that you did it for others who benefited not one single jot from your decoration. A fraud then and a fraud now. And to be quite clear, I have no issue and no objection whatsoever with regards to her personal opinions or her convictions. None at all, but I will respond robustly when my king and when Britain's empire is disparaged in order to attempt to elevate oneself, because that's what it's all about, and I see right through it. It's disingenuous and it's vulgar, and to be quite honest, it's going out of fashion. So give it a rest, love. It's exactly why I spoke out after the same rank and vulgar hypocrisy emanated from Harry and Meghan Sussex, and I make no apologies for it. I also had great respect for King Charles, she says, who was then the Prince of Wales, and his decades battling on behalf of social and environmental justice. Oh, and so now you throw a great big tantrum, and you disavow the king, and you throw your respect for him to the wolves simply because he did his job. As I write this, we see that horrible excuse of a human, called Trump, in full flow at the UN General Assembly, his poisonous rhetoric amplified and legitimised. He was elected POTUS, my dear, President of the United States. That legitimises him, so if Americans love Trump, I understand why. If Americans loathe Trump, I understand why. I can see from both sides. But either way, democracy is democracy. The office of the President of the United States legitimizes him, not the King. And if that office is problematic for you, which it is for many people, Democratic and Republican, by the way, ask them about their feelings about that office with the election of Joseph Robinette Biden, and whether or not they think it was secure in the postal votes. And I'm quite sure that it flip-flops on both sides and both ways. But if that office is problematic for you, then you must take up the issue and lobby for it in the USA in the appropriate quarters to deal with that and look into that. Do you understand? Whistles are for dogs and cats and other animals, but not for the King, and definitely not for me. It's called diplomacy, you bimbo. And I'm speaking in the purest sense of the word, by the way, the Italian. Little child is the meaning of bimbo, as evidenced by this handwriting of yours, my dear, of which Prince Louis would be ashamed. Last week's display showed me nothing of those values I thought King Charles held, or its spirit. Rather a frightening and cowardly display of appeasing someone who stands for the obliteration of the natural world and the most vulnerable people on earth. Because I can't reconcile those two positions, I have shredded my honour. You certainly have, if you had any to begin with, my dear, and am returning it to sender. Oh, well, I'm sure the King will be devastated, my darling Livy. Boo-hoo-hoo. Inconsolable he'll be. You have no understanding of royalty, or the role of sovereign, the deep and soft power of a neutral head of state that is able to deftly and seamlessly host the Bidens and the Trumps, the Sunaks and the Starmers of this world. It is actually the King who is being hailed this week for expanding Trump's horizons over the Ukraine problem. Yes, the King. You think he would retain such soft power by ostracizing or insulting any leader, let alone the, albeit temporary, leader of the Western world in the form of President Trump, as well as our strongest ally? The King was not appeasing Trump, my dear. Did you notice, for example, he didn't return any of the flattery and the compliments given by President Trump to the King, which President Trump totally understands, by the way. That is not the role of a monarch. It is not cricket to behave in such a manner when performing duties as a neutral head of state. King Charles was hosting the head of state of our greatest ally on behalf of his government, on behalf of the nation, and like it or not, the President of the United States is not in power by way of a dictatorship or an absolute monarchy, but by democratic and popular collegiate vote. So wind your neck in, love, and next time you disparage sovereign and empire, don't go crawling to them for your lousy 3 letters after your godforsaken name, which is a right old mouthful as it is, Livia Giugio Lee Firth. Having said that, I wish you very well and bid you good day. Thank you for the pleasure of your company and for joining me for a good old giggle. Feel free to leave me your juicy comments and fruity thoughts, and if you wish to treat me to a cup of tea or pain au chocolat, my tip jar is in the description box. But I look forward to seeing you next time. Let's all sing along to the outro. I've got the tempo right now. Can I get the key? Do, 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 do. Do, 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 do.